Hey folks, this is Double RPG here, and this is kind of a late video, but I would just want to say that just recently I hit over 2,000 subscribers on my YouTube channel. And I kind of wanted to do something special for you all, but I just couldn't even think what it was that I wanted to do for you, as I've been really busy with a lot of stuff, and just recently I did something that I thought was actually really cool, and I thought I'd just show it to you all. So consider this video my personal thanks for subscribing to my content, and you can always stick to my YouTube channel for more content coming from me in the future that you won't find anywhere else. Anyway, before I get started here, I want to talk about the Super Nintendo. I honestly think it's the best system that Nintendo has ever put out after their initial console back in 1983. And then the Super Nintendo came out in 1990 in Japan, and then a year later for both the US and Europe, if I'm not mistaken. And I always thought that the Super Nintendo had the best lineup of games. There were like over 900 of them, which is very uncalled for a console. I mean, I think the Nintendo DS actually managed to surpass that with its lifetime. But when I look back at what the Super Nintendo did, it just, man, it's just all those great games that just came out for it, like the RPGs, the platformers, the action games. They were just all there. And to this day, I still think that the Super Nintendo holds up really well even after over 25 years of its existence. So for this video today, I'm going to show you my collection of Super Nintendo games as well as Super Famicom games that I own, as I've been playing a lot of them as of recent, and I do play them on my Retron 5, which, you know, the Retron 5 is kind of controversial to some people, but it does actually play games from cartridges, so I still technically think it's a video game console per se, but I've just been really enjoying what I've been playing so far. So as my personal thanks, I'm going to show you both my Super Nintendo and Super Famicom games that I picked up as of recent, because you'll actually be surprised on some of them that I actually own. So anyway, let's go ahead and get started. I got a bag right here, and these are all the Super Nintendo games I have. Now, I actually own more Super Famicom games, but you'll have to wait until I get to those momentarily. So anyway, they're not going to be in any order, so we're just going to go through them one by one, and I'll tell you my own personal experiences with them and what I think, you know, if I think they hold up well or not. But they mostly do, but we'll just, like I said, we'll go through each one of them, and then I'll end off the video with some personal plugs and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, let's get started. So, first game, Batman Returns, Super Nintendo. This is actually probably the best version of Batman Returns for a video game that we got, aside from all the other ones that came out that were on the Sega consoles, and even the beat-em-up that's on the NES, which I still think that one's actually pretty good too. But when it comes to probably the best polish, then this is the one that all of us should go for, or all of you should go for. So definitely find this if you haven't. Next up, Goof Troop. This is the game that actually made two-player co-op games really fun. And some people say it predated The Legend of Zelda 4 Swords, and honestly I do agree to that too. But, you know, you play as two players, you play as both Goofy and his son Max, and some of the stuff that you actually do in the game for being a two-player co-op adventure game is actually pretty decent and pretty fun. So, and not to mention that Shinji Mikami actually worked on this title, one of the only two Disney games he's ever worked on, which I have the other with me, but I'll show you that one very soon. But anyway, Goof Troop, really great game. Definitely suggest that you pick that up as soon as you can. Next up, The Great Circus Mystery, starring both Mickey and Minnie Mouse. This is the sequel to Magical Quest starring Mickey Mouse that came out on the Super Nintendo. I think it was in 1991 or 1992. I can't remember. I'll put a pop-up on the screen to see which year it came out, but I could be mistaken on either one of those, but I know it came out very early. But this is the sequel to that game, and honestly, The Great Circus Mystery, it actually is really fun for what it did. I mean, it may not be as you know, it may not be as spectacular as the first, or the sequels may not be so spectacular as the first Magical Quest, but I still think that this game actually holds up really well for what it did. So anyway, if you like two-player features, or if you like two-player adventure games or two-player platform games, then this is definitely another one that you need to try out. It's a shame that we didn't get the third game, but hey, beggars can't be choosers, right? Next up, Super Mario World 2, Yoshi's Island. This game, it's still probably my favorite Mario game on the Super Nintendo. I mean, I know a lot of people like to digress and say that it's the game that started off the Yoshi franchise, and yeah, I can definitely agree to that. But for what it did and all the things that you could do in the game to try to complete it 100%, they're just fantastic. And I still think it's probably the hardest Mario game on the Super Nintendo to date because of what all you had to do in that game to try and get all the secret levels and, just to try to complete it at 100%. So if you haven't, definitely pick this up. I know it's kind of a rare treat to get your hands on, but hey, if you can get it, more power to you. Battletoads and Double Dragon. Oh boy. Now this is what I'm talking about here. This is the first collaboration game between, I think, Rare and Tradewest, as Tradewest owned, or Technos owned the rights to Double Dragon, in which Tradewest actually published that game for the Western market, as well as Battletoads. So it only makes sense that these two legendary franchises would come together to probably bring about the most awesome beat-em-up that has ever existed. I mean, this game scores really well as both a Battletoads game and a Double Dragon game. So if you can get your hands on at least the Super Nintendo version for its sound, then I definitely suggest that you do so. It's really a great trip. And pretty hard too, but, great stuff. Star Fox. And yeah, Star Fox, the game that started it all for probably one of the most relatively obscure franchises from Nintendo's history, even though it is making a comeback on the Wii U in the form of Star Fox Zero, which I am picking up this December, so that's definitely going to be really fun to try out. And but for me personally, this game, I still think it holds up really well, although I can't say about the graphics. I mean, the graphics, even though it has the Super Effects chip, when it produced polygons that were so blocky, it didn't seem like it was really meant for that kind of thing. But, it's still fun. I would definitely suggest that you give it a try when you haven't. Anyway, next up is Illusion of Gaia. This is the second game in Quintet's Creation trilogy that preceded Soul Blazer, and then it was succeeded by Terranigma. And this game itself, it's pretty fun for the Legend of Zelda / Final Fantasy RPG type of clone. It is an adventure RPG, so. But great story, great characters. Definitely suggest that you try it if you haven't, or import it if you can. Tiny Toons Adventures, Buster Busts Loose. This is the sequel to the NES games, which were side-scrolling platformers, and they kind of went for more of a Super Mario Bros. 3 type of feel, and I think this one kind of does too, but I kind of think it went off on its own tangent in a sense. It didn't feel like a Super Mario Bros. Game per se. But still, I think it's a lot of fun, even though some people still prefer the NES original Tiny Toons Adventures. But for a Super Nintendo outing, it's really not that bad. Okay, next up. Oh, you can't go wrong with this. Killer Instinct. Probably my favorite fighting game from the Super Nintendo era. I know a lot of people prefer either Street Fighter 2 or Mortal Kombat, but for me personally, I think this one that attempted to appeal to both sides is a really great treat for all of us to have. So, if you haven't got this already, then what the hell is wrong with you? Next up, Disney's Aladdin. This is the other game that Shinji Mikami worked on, and definitely one of the most prolific and just outstanding SNES platformers today. It's kind of a mixture of Prince of Persia as well as some of the other side-scrolling action games that you come to know and love, and and that other stuff. And this game is, this version of the 16-bit Disney's Aladdin games that we got, this was probably my personal favorite. Not because it just has the Capcom name, but just because of how polished it is as a side-scroller. So I definitely suggest that you pick it up if you haven't. Next up is The Adventures of Batman and Robin. And we all know that Batman on the NES was something that a lot of people really adore to this day as one of the best superhero games ever to date. And I personally like to think of this game as the spiritual successor to the gameplay style that game went for, because this game had everything you could do. It had gadgets that Batman could use, and he could even punch people in side-scrolling fashion, and he can even wall jump like what he could do in the Batman NES game, which preferably a lot of people like to compare that game to Ninja Gaiden. So, The Adventures of Batman and Robin? Yeah, definitely give that a pass. A pass as in you know, definitely try it out if you haven't. Okay, next up, Wonders of Ys 3, or Ys 3, as you like to call it. Yeah, I'm probably going to get a lot of flack for this one for people saying that I own the worst version of Ys, or the worst entry in the series. And yeah, I don't blame them, and I can see as a why that people don't actually really like this version of the game, although Oath of Felghana, which is the third game in the series, is actually considered the best. You know, that's kind of ironic. I mean, you have one version, or one game, or one original game that many people consider to be the worst, but its remake is actually considered the best in the series. That's kind of a... that's... you know, it's kind of like a scale or something. You know, you can either judge the game for what it is, or what it manages to accomplish after that, but Wonders of Ys 3, I would say definitely give that a skip if you haven't. But if you are a big Ys fan, then this is definitely one you're going to want to own in your collection. But definitely pick up Oath of Felghana, either on PSP or PC. Okay, next up, Cool Spot. This game is actually not that bad. I mean, this is one of the Super Nintendo games developed by Version Interactive. And Version, we already know that it was a very big, popular entertainment brand for its time. And the game's a side-scrolling platformer, like usual. A lot of the games I have, the Super Nintendo games I have, are side-scrolling platformers. Holy crap! And Cool Spot, you actually do a lot of things like shoot sprite balls at your enemies, as well as picking up sprite logos, or not sprite, 7-Up. My God! Or why did I confuse 7-Up for Sprite? You actually shoot 7-Up magic, fizz or whatever, and you collect 7-Up spots in order to get enough to try and either get 100% or to get to the bonus stage at the end, as well as saving your spot comrades. So this game, for what it is, it's pretty standard. I don't think it holds up very well because it does have its own faults, but still, I think it's a decent entry. Okay, next up is Battletoads and Battlemaniacs, the official sequel to Battletoads on the NES, and I definitely think, even though it's the sequel, this is probably the weakest entry in my opinion, because I think this game tried way too hard to be like the original Battletoads, and it even felt very similar to, although much more compact or compressed, as a lot of the levels that we saw in the original were not even in this one, but probably they just took advantage of the ones that were extremely frustrating and extremely hard from the original, and they just decided to cram it into this game. So, Rare, I don't blame you for trying to do that, but still, it probably wouldn't have hurt to make its own original adventure, don't you think? But still, Battletoads and Battlemaniacs, if you can appreciate the game for its difficulty, maddening difficulty, which I think it's more maddening than the original, then pick it up. Okay, Magical Quest, starring Mickey Mouse. This is definitely one of my favorite Disney-based games that Capcom has managed to put out. And this game, it was pretty original for what it did. I mean, you have Mickey going around the magical areas like, you know, in most Disney games that involves Mickey Mouse, he would go into places that were very fantasy-like, magical, and that kind of stuff. And he has his own signature power-ups in this game, which can, you know, he can transform into a genie to shoot magic at, he can transform into a fireman to blow water from a hose, and he can transform into a rock climber, which he has a hook he can lean onto ledges and that kind of stuff, or climb up from ledges. So, Magical Quest, or the Magical Quest, this is definitely one that you guys should definitely pick up. I would suggest the SNES original and not the Game Boy Advance one, because I definitely think that the Game Boy Advance one didn't really hold up that well in terms of sound, but for what this done, yeah, it's really fun. Next up is Stunt Race FX. This game is kind of a mixed bag for a lot of people, for having the Super FX chip in it and having those 3D polygonal models. But for me personally, for what it did, I think it's actually pretty cool. I mean, a lot of people enjoy Star Fox more because it's a lot more memorable than this, but this is probably one that you're going to want to definitely skip out on. But if you really are big into Super Nintendo or just like racing games in general, then yeah, this is probably one that you're going to want to pick up. And last but not least, on the Super Nintendo block, we have Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Tournament Fighters on the Super Nintendo. This game is a Street Fighter clone. It managed to get 3 versions, one on the NES, one on the Sega Genesis, and one on the Super Nintendo. This is probably my most favorite version of the bunch because this definitely played a lot more like Street Fighter, whereas the Sega Genesis version, it had a lot of its problems and didn't hold up very well. In the NES one, I haven't even got my hands on because that game is so expensive to try and get a hold of a copy of. But this game, for what it did, it's really fun. I definitely think it's wicked hard to play, even as much as the other versions, because every time when you try to do a lot of your moves, you would always get your attacks blocked from your opponents and that kind of stuff. So I definitely believe that this game actually owed more of an homage to Samurai Showdown than it did to Street Fighter, because you have to be more tactical with trying to plan out your strikes and everything was defense-based. But for what it is, yeah. Definitely some kick-ass fighting games that, or definitely a kick-ass fighting game you can get a hold of. So, yeah, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Tournament Fighters. I definitely recommend for those who are fighting game buffs to pick this up. But if you're not really that big into fighting games, just skip it. But for me personally, I personally have a place for this in my heart. All right, guys, we're back, and as you can see, I got me a huge bag. And this doesn't contain like over 1 million Super Famicom cartridges, as I probably have close to 30. So we'll try to go through them real quick. And let's get started with our first one here. First one, ooh, for fighting game fans, you'll actually really enjoy this one. This is Dragon Ball Z Hyper Dimension. Definitely one of the best Dragon Ball Z fighting games out there. I know a lot of people didn't really get their hands on this because it was only available in Japan, but it did actually make its way to Europe. But for a fighting game for itself, it actually is pretty innovative. I mean, it doesn't have a health bar or a key bar, as they both share one and the same. So any of the special attacks you do, it will actually drain from your health bar. So, and the fighting system mechanic in this game was actually pretty innovative. So I definitely give you my full 2 cents to pick this up if you haven't. Next up, ooh, this one right here. This is the Japanese version of Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island, but they just call it Super Mario Yoshi's Island. Like I said, Japanese version, I already talked about it in the what I talked about in the Super Nintendo cartridges, and a lot of Japanese text in this one, as I really don't think you need to learn how to play it from the Japanese text if you can already read it from the English. So for me, owning both versions, yeah, this is definitely one of the few instances where I actually own both the Western and the Eastern copies. So yeah, either version, definitely pick up. This is Street Fighter 2. A lot of people like to say Street Fighter 2 is the most revolutionary fighting game of all time, and they really like it for the Super Nintendo, although I know a lot of people prefer Turbo over the original. But for Street Fighter 2, for what it is, it still holds a very special place in my heart. And you don't really need to figure out what the Japanese text says, as most of it retains in its original format. I mean, it's just a fighting game. I mean, you really don't have to look up into the story or anything like that. But yeah, Street Fighter 2, definitely a good pickup. Next up, Super Donkey Kong. This is the Japanese version of Donkey Kong Country that we got in 1994. Super Donkey Kong, for it being the Japanese version, there are some noticeable differences aside from just there being Japanese text. But like the opening intro screen or the opening intro title screen is actually a lot different than what we got in the West, as it shows a lot more of the characters in a much more brighter background. But yeah, Super Donkey Kong, if you're familiar with Donkey Kong Country, then you really don't need to figure out how to play this, and but still, really fun, enjoyable. Oh boy, a lot of people are probably going to be very jealous of me for owning this copy, but Chrono Trigger. Yes, I got me the Super Famicom version of Chrono Trigger in my hands, as the original American version likes to go for gangbusters, somewhere up to close to $100 for a copy if you could find it at a retro store. But I managed to get mine from eBay for about $10, as I had mine directly imported from Japan, no question about that. So yeah, Chrono Trigger, I don't think I need to explain any more about what it is. Really think it's the best RPG ever made. But yeah, if you can get your hands on a cheap copy, then this is probably the one you're going to want to find online. So okay, next up, this is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Turtles in Time, the Japanese version of the same SNES game that we got over here in America. as you can see, it's a lot different for the cover art than what we got in the Western world, as the Western world paid more homage to the comics, whereas this, it actually paid more homage to the cartoon. But still, really fun game. There are some noticeable differences, like you have less lives, or you can you can't boost up lives to either 5 or 7 when you're playing through a full game like you could in the North American version, as the max was 3. So you had to be very strategic, and you know, you had to be more balls to the walls to try to play this one a lot better. But yeah, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Turtles in Time, if you're into beat 'em ups, definitely pick this up, either American or this one. Definitely holds a place in my heart. It is definitely one of the first Super Nintendo games I owned of all time. And ironically enough, this was actually the first Super Famicom version game I ever owned. So looks like history is repeating itself for me, but you know. Anyway, definitely a great pickup. Next up, oh boy, it's Final Fantasy VI. If you are unaware, Final Fantasy VI for the Super Nintendo in 1994, we got this game under the name Final Fantasy III. Yep, it's another one of those great RPGs that everybody wish they could own, and they do go for a lot of money if you can find them at retro stores, as I got mine at a pretty cheap price too. So yeah, definitely give this a pickup if you can, or if you have a Wii or a Wii U, you can still go in the Wii Shop channel and play the game through the Wii Virtual Console mode. So definitely, you know, give this a pickup if you can. Next up, this is Ganbare Goemon 2. This is actually the sequel to Legend of the Mystical Ninja, which the game actually, Legend of the Mystical Ninja, it actually managed to get 3 sequels on the SNES, or the Super Famicom, but they were only available in Japan. This is the first sequel to come out, and I definitely think this is actually the better game for what it did. You can actually get yourself into first-person, huge mecha robotic battles, and this game was more side-scroller heavy. It actually felt better being a side-scroller. And, you know, for it being released in Japan, it's just a shame that we didn't get this or any of the other 2 games over here in the West, because I think they probably could have benefited more to the overall greatness that the Goemon series managed to go for. So, yeah, if you can get your hands on this online through Amazon, eBay, or whatnot, definitely give this a good pickup. I definitely think it's worth every penny. Okay, next up, this is The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, where it is known as Triforce of the Gods in Japan. So, yes, definitely one of the best Zelda games ever made. Definitely my personal favorite on the, you know, from what Nintendo's ever came up with, until 2013 when A Link Between Worlds came out. I definitely think that dethroned that, but, you know, that's just opinions. But, so, if you don't know that much about The Legend of Zelda, then you're definitely missing out on a lot. This game actually is more Japanese-centric, and there are some noticeable differences, like most of the religion that you would see in the game is still intact, as they weren't even subdued in the Western releases. So, yeah, for what it is, The Legend of Zelda: Triforce of the Gods, definitely still the great Zelda game that came out on the SNES that we got in, I think it was 1992, if I want to be precise. Yeah, I think that's what it is. But yeah, still, great game. Definitely pick it up. Next up, oh boy, this is called Seiken Densetsu 3. This is actually the sequel to Secret of Mana, which we never even got in the West, and I definitely think this is the much better game that ever came out of that series. As we all know, the first game that came out was Final Fantasy Adventure on the Game Boy, and then its sequel came out on the Super Nintendo, known as Seiken Densetsu 2, which we got over here in the West, called Secret of Mana. And this is the direct sequel to that. Doesn't have any relation to Secret of Mana, but I definitely think that the combat is a lot better, and the stories are very intricate and it just really varied, depending on who you play as and which allies that you get. But yeah, this is definitely a great pickup for those who are into imports. Okay, this is Super Donkey Kong 3. This is actually Donkey Kong Country 3 Dixie Kong's Double Trouble that came out in Japan. Still, great game. There are little noticeable differences, but really not that much, but still, it's Donkey Kong Country, so what can you expect? Oh, speaking of which, we got Super Donkey Kong 2, which is Donkey Kong Country 2 Diddy's Conquest that we got in the West. Definitely my favorite entry in the Donkey Kong Country franchise, and I definitely think that the Japanese version actually is just as spectacular as the Western release we got. So, And I definitely like the cover art that they show in this game. Definitely a lot more than what we see in the SNES versions, you know, which is quite a theme that we've seen to be going on with. I mean, there are some that are about the same as the Western versions, but for most others, they are pretty different, like this one. So, yeah, Donkey Kong Country Trilogy, if you could pick it up for the original cartridges or on the Wii or Wii Virtual Console, definitely pick them up. Okay, we got ourselves Dragon Quest VI. I think this was the second to last game that released on the Super Nintendo before, or the Super Famicom before the jump to the PlayStation consoles. And what I say by second is that this was the second to third game to come out, is that this was actually the second game in the Dragon Quest series to come out for the Super Famicom, and then the next one that came after that was the remake to Dragon Quest III. This one I haven't really gotten to that much, but for what I played, it's very different, but still a lot of fun. For RPG buffs, oh boy, you're missing out on some good stuff right here. Oh boy, this is probably my most recent pickup. This is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Warriors, which is actually the Japanese version to Tournament Fighters. Already talked about Tournament Fighters. There are noticeable differences in this version as well, like with the character Asuka, who bared more of a thong and actually had jiggle physics to her breasts, but anyway, they really subdued that for the Western release, but still, really great game. Different announcer voice too, but yeah, still as hard as balls. And I played it last night, works really well. I definitely give it the benefit of the doubt and give it my money. Okay, next up, this is probably one of my big prized possessions right here. This is Tales of Phantasia that came out on the Super Famicom in 1995. This was the first game that ever introduced, or that managed to incorporate 48 megabytes of memory in a Super Famicom cartridge. Definitely holds a really big place in my heart. I did a Let's Play of it maybe about 2 or 3 years ago. Definitely one of my favorite JRPGs on the Super Famicom. Definitely a great game. I definitely think this had the better story when compared to the only 2 games that were in 48 megabytes of memory, but still, this is definitely a treat you want to pick up. Okay, and speaking of Dragon Quest III, that's the next game I have right here. Definitely one of the best remakes to a Dragon Quest game to date. I really like the premise of how it is the prequel to the trilogy that revolves around the hero Erdrick, as he was known in Dragon Warrior for North America, where he was named as Lodo in Japanese. It's still a great Dragon Quest gameplay. Really great presentation with the sprites, by the way, if I do say so myself, and definitely one of the gems that you must own in your collection. Okay, and another Dragon Ball Z game. This is Dragon Ball Z Super Saiyan Densetsu, which is known as Legend of the Super Saiyan. This is one of the last few Dragon Ball Z RPGs that we got before they went more the route of the fighting game format for the Super Famicom. And for what it is, it's pretty addictive, if I do say so myself, and very intricate of a battle system, really grind heavy, and pretty difficult. But yeah, for RPG nuts, this is definitely another one of those gems you want to pick up if you can. And I also managed to get this for 10 bucks at a retro store, by the way. Okay, Super Mario Kart. I own the Japanese Super Famicom version of this. There are a couple noticeable differences, such as Bowser's victory animation when he wins tournaments, as well as Peach's, where she actually drinks the champagne bottles, as well as Bowser chugging like 2 of them down into his mouth. I think they're actually pretty funny animations, but you don't really need to know that much about what they are when they're trying to speak in Japanese or any of that kind of stuff. But still, great Super Mario Kart goodness. Definitely pick it up. Tactics Ogre. This is a really great tactics game, or a strategy RPG. This is the game that predated Final Fantasy Tactics, as a lot of the developers and creators of that game actually worked on this game, which is their first attempt to try to get into the shoes of Fire Emblem with the success that it has been having, that Nintendo has managed to put out with intelligent systems. Tactics Ogre, I used to play the Sony PlayStation version when it came out in North America. I haven't tried my hands on the Japanese Super Famicom original, but still, I'm going to give it a shot. I definitely think it's worth the money for great strategy, RPG, or tactics games type of fashion, so yeah. Next up, it is An American Tail, Fievel Goes West. This was a very surprising entry I picked up. This is the second game that I owned, and it is a side-scrolling platformer, and it's very similar to that of the Western release we got, but still. Really great side-scroller. Kind of hard, but only not that bad. Very typical side-scroller. Great stuff. Super Mario World. So yes, I actually do own Super Mario World in the Super Famicom cartridge. Not that much of a difference, but you can actually have Yoshi eat the dolphins in that one water level. So yeah, I think that's actually pretty funny, you know, considering the customs of Japan. But still, if you like Super Mario World, then you're definitely going to want to play this. And you really don't need to know that much of what's being said in Japanese. Oh, I said that was last. Super Mario RPG. And a lot of people are going to be like, "Aw, damn, you got another great RPG." And yes, I do. This is still probably my favorite JRPG to date, aside from just Chrono Trigger, but when it comes to a Mario-style RPG, this is definitely my all-time favorite. So, can't really say any more about this game. Definitely great stuff. Super Mario Collection. This is actually the Japanese Super Famicom version of Super Mario All-Stars. The only noticeable differences are the box art that you actually see displayed on screen when you're selecting your game, as well as the people talking in the background in the shadows at the beginning, so really nothing new from there. But still, great Mario game to date. You really don't need to know what's being said in Japanese, like I said with the other Mario games, but still, great stuff. Final Fantasy V. Probably my least favorite. The traditional Final Fantasies done where Hironobu Sakaguchi was director, as I feel that 3 and 4 were definitely the best, but for the second outing on Super Famicom, pretty difficult, but still a lot of fun. Definitely give it my benefit of the doubt. Okay, Seiken Densetsu 2, Secret of Mana. Again, Secret of Mana, I already talked about the sequel, Seiken Densetsu 3. Secret of Mana still holds a place in a lot of people's hearts, definitely for me too. Definitely think it's a really great story, really great fighting system, or a combat system for an RPG, and just how magical and how much it ages well, even to this day. So yeah, Seiken Densetsu 2, pick it up if you haven't, or if you have a lot of money, then pick up Secret of Mana if you can. Okay, we only got 2 left, and this is Terranigma. This is probably one of the must-haves for any retro collector who are looking for hidden gems and that kind of stuff. So, Terranigma is the 3rd game in the Creation Trilogy, right after Illusion of Gaia. Definitely think this is the much better game, and it actually manages to be a lot more creative with the presentation it went for in terms of its story and how it tries to play out the creation of the world that we know and that kind of stuff. So, this is definitely really great game. I definitely suggest that you pick it up if you can get the either the Japanese Super Famicom version or the European Super Nintendo version if you can. But still, I had the Japanese Super Famicom version, so I'm all good. And last but not least, probably one of my most prized possessions is Star Ocean. Yes, the very first Star Ocean that came out on the Super Famicom before it made its jump to the PlayStation consoles. So yeah, Star Ocean, the first one, I definitely think it is a much better game than the PSP remake we got, even though the PSP remake is actually still pretty good. But for a game itself where it didn't try to go for the whole world map feature where everything went for more of the screens of what the world map would look like from the different panels, kind of like what Final Fantasy X did with not having a world map as you just travel through many different locations, just going north or just keep going what's in front of you. But for what it did itself, this is definitely a great start to a great series. I definitely think that this game had the better battle system when compared to Tales of Phantasia, but in terms of story, I didn't really like it that much, even though it was entertaining. But for the story itself, it wasn't really my cup of tea. But still, if you can get a hold of this online, then definitely pick this up. And with that out of the way, those are all my Super Famicom games I wanted to show you, and all my SNES games too. So I just wanted to say thank you very much for subscribing to my channel, and I hope you all had a lot of fun, and be on the lookout for more content coming from me in the future if you know that you won't find anywhere else. And the reason why I did this was because, well, I thought it would be good to show off my collection of Super Nintendo and Super Famicom games, since the Super Nintendo was my favorite console to come out of Nintendo, and this is more of a tribute to RetroGamingTube 85, or who is known as Sean Long, who is also on the Nintendo Enthusiast. So, Sean Long, if you're watching this, then this video is definitely towards you, buddy. I mean, definitely for you, buddy. because of all the unboxings and the gaming pickups that you did. So I thought it was pretty cool that I tried my own too. So anyway, guys, I gotta get off here and I got to get to work on some more projects. But other than that, as I said, be on the lookout for more content coming from me in the future, and I'll definitely keep you posted on what's coming up in terms of 2 cents, reviews, and that kind of stuff. So anyway, this is Double RPG signing out, and I'll catch you later. Peace.